Welcome back to the series Sibling Rivalry on India and the World podcast. In today's episode, we look at a very important milestone in Indo-Pak relations, the 1965 war. This war was a result of massive miscalculations by Pakistani leadership when they seriously underestimated the strength, spirit and resolve of Indian soldiers as well as of Indian leadership. And it was a misadventure undertaken by them in April 1965 that was partly the cause of this underestimation. It all started in the desolate wasteland of the Rann of Kutch. The Rann was historically part of the princely state of Kutch. It formed Kutch's boundary with the Sindh province, which was part of Bombay Presidency before independence. British surveys of 1908 to 1914 described the Rann as a wasteland with no permanent settlements, and they failed to clearly define the actual borders. Local tribes and nomads moved freely across it, and colonial maps treated it more like a buffer zone rather than a fixed border. After independence, Kutch ceded to India and Sindh went to Pakistan. The area's ambiguous demarcation led to overlapping claims by both countries post-independence. Pakistan claimed the northern portion based on its proximity to Sindh, arguing that historical revenue records and the arbitrations by the British in 1854 to 1856 favoured their side. They also argued that Rann was essentially a dead sea and thus the rules of maritime boundary should apply, dividing it equally between adjoining states. India countered with evidence from the 1941 census and Kutch's accession treaty, which established its sovereignty over the entire region. At the time of partition, both parties had other more pressing boundary matters in mind and left this to be settled at a later stage. Minor skirmishes occurred in early 1950s as both sides established border outposts and commenced patrolling the disputed area. There were occasional escalations in tensions over grazing rights and salt extraction, but these remained as minor incidents of no great consequence. But in April 1965, this dispute flared up into active hostilities as part of a deliberate Pakistani plan. By some accounts, it was because Pakistan wanted to test India's resolve and reaction. The Rann of Kutch was strategically attractive to Pakistani forces because its terrain and communication network heavily favoured them. Pakistan had a railway connection and shorter road links from Karachi, allowing for quick and easy troop movement right up to the border. Indian approaches were much more difficult, with their nearest regular military formation about 80 kilometers away on the other side of a sandy waste. Thus, the Pakistanis were able to launch a massive tank attack using their American Patton tanks and were able to overrun the isolated Indian outposts. India responded by building up its forces, but due to limited communication network, this was slow and insufficient. Before the fighting got out of hand, however, the British Prime Minister Harold Wilson stepped in and brokered a ceasefire. Both sides agreed to refer the dispute to international arbitration. Unfortunately for Pakistan, their leaders and planners drew some gravely erroneous conclusions from this skirmish. It bred a cocky overconfidence within the Pakistan Higher Command. President Ayub and his Foreign Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto underestimated Indian soldiers' mettle and the resolve of its political leadership. Ayub Khan famously calculated that, I quote, Hindu morale would not stand more than a couple of hard blows, unquote. Air Marshal Asghar Khan, former Air Chief of Pakistan, writes, what is more, we were inclined to see in the episode a model for a Kashmir settlement, a local military gain, followed by mediation by alarmed superpowers and the affair ending in a peaceful settlement through arbitration or similar means. Pakistan had watched with alarm as India had gone ahead with moves to erode the disputed status of Kashmir and its closer integration with India. These moves included changes in the state's constitution to bring Kashmir at par with other states. The designation of Sadr-e-Riyasat or President and Prime Minister of Kashmir would be abolished, and these titles would be replaced with Governor and Chief Minister like in other states. Pakistan's repeated attempts to highlight Kashmir in the United Nations were also not leading anywhere, primarily thanks to Soviet support to India. The proverbial unkindest cut was the remark by the US ambassador to the UN, Adlai Stevenson, in a conversation with Foreign Minister Bhutto, that US felt Pakistan kept bringing Kashmir to the Security Council merely for internal propaganda. Clearly, the United States was becoming unsympathetic to the Kashmir cause. Pakistan thus believed 1965 was their last window of opportunity to take Kashmir by force. The United States and Soviet Union were pouring military aid into India after the 1962 Chinese defeat. In a few years, India's military modernization would make initiating any military action by Pakistan impossible. The clock was ticking. President Ayub Khan appointed a group of high-ranking officials to suggest a course of action. Chaired by the Foreign Secretary Aziz Ahmed, this was called the Kashmir Publicity Committee. It recommended the covert infiltration of Pakistani soldiers disguised as Kashmiri guerrillas or volunteers into Indian-held Kashmir. Their mission would be to sabotage infrastructure, capture radio stations, and promote a general uprising by the civil population. Thus, they hoped to force a military and political resolution to the Kashmir dispute. This was not very different from what they had tried when they had sent the raiders across in 1947. Ayub Khan gave the go-ahead to the preparation of a plan by the General Headquarters. The operation, codenamed Gibraltar, was prepared by Major General Akhtar Hussain Malik, and it was approved by Ayub Khan. It was based on three assumptions. Firstly, people in Kashmir would rise to support the guerrillas. Secondly, a large-scale Indian offensive against Pakistan-occupied Kashmir was unlikely. And thirdly, the possibility of attack across the international border could be completely ruled out. As the events unfolded, all of these turned out to be wrong. On 5th August 1965, the infiltrators slipped over the mountains from various points along the ceasefire line and entered into the Indian side. They spread out and carried out some acts of sabotage. But this is where the first miscalculation came in. Pakistan assumed the Kashmiri people were ready to revolt and all they needed was a trigger. They were led to this belief because of the massive civil unrest that had taken place in the recent past due to the loss of a holy relic. In December 1963, the Moe-e-Muqaddas, a strand of hair believed to belong to the Prophet Muhammad, went missing from the Hazratbal mosque in the valley. The relic was held in highest reverence by the local population. People took to the streets in large numbers. A complete hartal paralyzed Srinagar, bringing all shops, offices and transport to a halt. Local government collapsed and the centre was forced to dispatch a strong contingent of central forces to restore the situation. Peace was restored after the relic was found and situation gradually returned to normalcy. But Pakistani planners had mistakenly taken the outbreak as a sign of general discontent among the people with the Indian administration. So, when the Pakistani infiltrators came in, instead of rising up and joining the infiltrators, the local Kashmiris reported them to the Indian authorities. The Indian army quickly mobilized, sealing the infiltration routes and liquidating the saboteurs. India's low-key response to the Rann of Kutch incident had led to heavy criticism of the government from the opposition and the people. With another grave provocation coming in within months, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri decided that India would no longer sit back. It would carry the fight to the other side. The army was given the clearance to cross the ceasefire line. Their primary target was the Haji Pir Pass. This pass sits at an altitude of 8,652 feet on the Pir Panjal range. It was a vital hub used by Pakistani infiltrators to cross into the Indian side. The task to capture was given to the 68th Infantry Brigade under Brigadier Z.C. Bakshi. The spearhead was 1 Para, or the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, led by Major Ranjit Singh Dayal. The operation commenced on 26th August. It was a grueling operation requiring a steep 4,000 feet vertical ascent. The Indian troops did this in the dead of night, at times crawling on all fours through heavy rain. Major Dayal and his men outflanked the Pakistani defenders on Haji Pir Pass. Caught by surprise, they abandoned their heavy weapons and fled. India's capture of the entire Haji Pir Bulge and the Haji Pir Pass was a major strategic victory, as it neutralized the logistic setup and plugged the ingress routes of the infiltrators. It also brought the Poonch-Uri road under Indian control, reducing the road distance between these two towns from 282 kilometers to just 56 kilometers. Pakistan by now had too much skin in the game to quietly accept the failure of their plans. Desperate to reverse their fortunes, Pakistan felt compelled to escalate the war. This escalation was based on further miscalculations. They felt that if Pakistan went in for a short, sharp action with its conventional forces, as it had done in Kutch, the UN would soon call for ceasefire. There would be a Kutch-type proposal for settling the Kashmir dispute by international arbitration. This would attain their political aim of defreezing the Kashmir issue and bringing it on the world stage again. Thus, on 29th August 1965, Ayub Khan sent the following top-secret order titled Political Aim for Struggle in Kashmir to the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, General Muhammad Musa. He ordered him, I quote, to take such actions that will defreeze Kashmir problem, weaken India's resolve and bring her to a conference table without provoking a general war, end quote. Based on these directions, Pakistan launched Operation Grand Slam on September 1st. This was a massive conventional attack utilizing heavy artillery and Patton tanks across the ceasefire line and international border in Jammu. The target was Akhund, a vital town in the Jammu region. Capturing Akhund would cut off Kashmir from the rest of India. The launch of an operation of this scale was an open declaration of war. The Indian forces in this sector were surprised and outnumbered. The shock and momentum carried the Pakistani assault well into Indian territory in Cham-Jorian area. By the second day, Pakistani forces had crossed the Manawar Tawi river and were poised to march towards Akhund. But then something strange happened on the Pakistani side. Right in the middle of the offensive, President Ayub Khan replaced the GOC Major General Akhtar Hussain Malik with Major General Yahya Khan. This abrupt change of command caused a 24-hour delay in further Pakistani advance. Why was this done? General Gul Hassan later stated that it was pure politics. Some critics believe Malik was removed so he wouldn't get the glory of victory. General Yahya was a protege of General Ayub and even subsequently his successor. Whatever the reason, the delay derailed Pakistan's chances of victory. That 24-hour pause allowed the Indian Army to regroup and reinforce positions ahead of Akhund. Indian Air Force had also swung into action and was causing heavy casualties to the Pakistani side. But the threat to Akhund remained a live one. To relieve the pressure on Akhund, Prime Minister Shastri made a bold, unexpected decision. On September 6, he ordered Indian Army to cross the international border and attack West Pakistan's heartland in Punjab. Indian troops marched towards the major Pakistani cities of Lahore and Sialkot. This completely shocked Pakistan. Their third assumption, made while launching Gibraltar and subsequently Grand Slam, also proved to be wrong. Pakistan was forced to rapidly pull its tanks out of Akhund sector and redeploy them to defend Punjab. The war now moved into the plains, setting the stage for epic tank battles. Pakistan still had one ace up its sleeve, the 1st Armoured Division. Equipped with advanced American-made M47 and M48 Patton tanks, it was a formidable force against India's older American Sherman and British Centurion tanks. On September 8th, Pakistan launched its armoured division towards the Indian village of Khemkaran in Punjab. Their goal was to capture Amritsar and sever Indian supply lines. This would cut off the Indian forces that were threatening Lahore and Sialkot. The armoured division was met by India's 4th Mountain Division and 2nd Independent Armoured Brigade at a place called Asaluttar. The name was very appropriate because it's where the Indian Army gave a true reply to the Pakistani adversaries. Though outnumbered, the Indians fought smart. They weaponized the terrain and turned it into a trap for Pakistani tanks by breaching the local canals and flooding the sugarcane fields. The heavy Pakistani Patton tanks bogged down in the mud. The Indians then formed a defensive horseshoe trap. As the Pattons struggled in the muck, hidden Indian Centurion tanks and anti-tank gunners picked them off and destroyed them one by one. The result was devastating for Pakistan. The area came to be known as the graveyard of Pattons. While sources disagree on the exact number of losses, records state that 97 Pakistani tanks were either destroyed or captured intact. Indian losses were between 10 to 32 tanks in this sector as per various sources. Regardless of the exact numbers, the Pakistani offensive was utterly crushed. Meanwhile, an even larger battle raged to the north in the Sialkot sector at a town called Chavinda. The Indian 1st Armoured Division clashed head-on with Pakistan's 6th Armoured Division and 25th Cavalry. It was a grueling, bloody slugfest, with both sides fighting fiercely for every mile. Again, claims of the exact number of tank casualties are wildly contradictory. What is undisputed is that the Centurion tank, with its simpler design and heavy armour, outclassed the overly complex Patton tanks in actual combat. While these tank battles raged in the plains of Punjab, hectic international diplomacy was afoot to stop the war. As an outcome of this, on September 23rd, both sides accepted a UN-mandated ceasefire. Militarily, it was an inconclusive stalemate. However, India held a clear territorial advantage. India had captured roughly 1,900 square kilometers of Pakistani territory, while Pakistan held only about 550 square kilometers of Indian land. India had successfully thwarted Pakistan's attempt to seize Kashmir. For Pakistan, failing to achieve its objective meant that the war was a strategic failure. Could India have won a decisive victory if the war continued? This remains a massive point of historical debate. The Indian Army Chief General Chaudhry had advised Prime Minister Shastri to accept the ceasefire. Chaudhry falsely believed that India had used up most of its frontline ammunition. And then there was the looming threat of China stepping in to help out Pakistan. Official histories later revealed that India had actually fired only 14% of its ammunition, while Pakistan had exhausted nearly 80% of its stockpile. Even as per a declassified US State Department document, the Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, in a telephone conversation with President Johnson on 12th September, had given his assessment that Pakistan could sustain the operation only up to 4 weeks. He said, and I quote, "And then, at the end of that period, I would think that the total strength of the Indians in terms of men and equipment, which is roughly 4 times that of Pakistan's, would begin to be felt. And then by the end of say about 12 weeks, if the conflict continues that long, I would expect the Indians to be in a militarily advantageous position. End quote. But all that remains in the realm of speculation, as the war had ended in 3 weeks. Both armies ceased fire and the focus shifted from the soldiers in the battlefield to the negotiators on the dialogue table. The political leaders packed their bags for the peace conference in the Soviet city of Tashkent. It was a conference that would return the hard-won Haji Pir Pass to Pakistan and tragically claim the life of the Indian Prime Minister. But that is a story for our next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and do share it with your friends who may be interested. See you next time.